women in this day and age are very susceptible to infertility issues. In fact, from what I can understand, the statistics of infertility in women are increasing and population is reducing. So we're sort of getting to a point, particularly in Australia, where the reproduction in Australia with humans is becoming a deficit, which is an interesting concept. Now, this may or may not be to do with infertility. I think a lot of it's just choice, because women are wanting to reproduce later, they're wanting to focus on lifestyle and career, etc. And there is definitely much more choice involved in your reproduction, which I think is important. I'm definitely pro-choice, and I'm definitely not for overpopulating the planet in any way, shape or form. And I'm also not into unnecessarily breeding animals for the sheer sake of it. But there are cases where it is important that reproduction is addressed, and herbs over the millennia have been used for this very purpose, because obviously it was of great importance to traditional cultures to make sure that family and cultural units remained intact, and that there were also a next generation to help look after the older people, just to keep the community thriving. Having a discussion with anyone about fertility, we're always breaking down the diet. We're looking at issues of smoking, alcohol, sugar content in the diet, and making sure that the individual's home life is stable, so there's less. So stress is obviously an impacting factor. I'd say probably stress is probably one of the main issues, and couple that with poor eating habits and or pollution, then that's going to be your primary impacts. That's discounting other syndromes that might be impacting, for example, like polycystic ovary syndrome, general inflammation, or autoimmune conditions. So general disease obviously will also impact fertility issues, or your ability to fall pregnant. For our general fertility mix, I usually start with herbs that are, for a start, detoxing and trying to regulate the way the hormones are in the body. And if you think about what hormones are being impacted in states of infertility, for example, if you go to a fertility clinic, they'll be reading levels of progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, the FSH, all these, like follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone. All those hormones are very specific and need to be at reasonable levels within the body to be able to produce a healthy egg. Also be able to make sure that the egg is releasing ready for conception, and then there's the implantation process. So you need a healthy endometrium, which is the lining of the uterus. So all those things are really important, and the herbs that I use in any of my formulations are aimed at balancing out all of those hormones at the level they need to be. One of the probably the most impacting hormones that is a problem is actually low progesterone. So if you don't have a high enough level of progesterone in your bloodstream for dogs or cats or people, you can't sustain a pregnancy. If you have, for example, very low levels of folate, implantation isn't necessarily going to work and sustain a pregnancy. If you have poor circulation or inflammation of the uterus, or a very poorly toned uterus, then you're not going to have a possible implantation that's successful. So these are all things that I consider. Another thing that is interesting is high and low levels of testosterone, not in men but in women. And so estrogen dominance, testosterone dominance will all impact fertility. So all of my formulations are aiming to regulate and normalize the way the endocrine system is secreting hormones. And the other thing you need to remember too, if you've been on the pill is something that will actually suppress it. Usually they're progesterone pills, so they're high levels of progesterone. So that impacts the way the body's normal hormone feedback loops are working. So if you stop taking the pill, it's going to take quite a while for the endocrine system to start start again, to enable those hormones that should be supporting follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, all those hormones that are related to follicle release. So there's the corpus luteum that is what builds up, and then the follicle is released as a result of all these hormones being produced. So if we're wanting to support all of that, I like to do a detoxification usually that involves not just those hormonal tissues, so the gonadal endocrine system, but also just the general endocrine system, so your thyroid, your pancreas, just all of those areas in your body. For example, the pancreas is really important because I think we've talked about this before many times, and the issue with insulin resistance. So all those things are going to have a major impact on fertility, interestingly enough. So let's